Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Glad you're here. Happy Wednesday. Coming up later in the show, we're going to talk to someone from Samaritan's Purse who's been stationed and working in Italy for the last month or so. So really excited about that interview and get their insight into still what's going on in Italy. I've been thinking about this thing, and we're going to talk about toilet paper here in a second. But first, I don't know how to word this properly, and this isn't quite right, but I've been thinking about this. I just wanted to see what you think. Because I want to try to start every show off with some sort of humble statement, because no one has any idea about anything still. And there's so much uncertainty, and I think that's really important to recognize that every day. So I was thinking something like this, like if you hear a pundit on TV or anywhere, whatever, and if they're not saying, I was wrong, nearly every day about something, then they're probably not keeping up fast enough. Because things are changing so fast. And I think I was really thinking about that, because remember the other day we played the clip of Dr. Drew, and Dr. Drew for a long time said this is no big deal, it's just like the flu. And then the other day he had the moral courage to come up and say, ooh, geez, I was wrong about that. And I don't see enough of that. But it has to be true. So either a pundit or whoever, or a politician, they're either not saying anything interesting, right? Or they just they dig their heels in and they're not changing their stance on anything, no matter what information's coming their way. And that's not helpful. Neither of those are helpful. So anyway, just want to throw that your way, and we'll see how that applies moving forward. Something we're going to talk more on the show tomorrow, but it's amazing. I'm reading these stories from doctors and researchers about HCQ and used with zinc and other medicines, and how promising it is and how encouraging some of their results are. And then I'm hearing from these doctors and researchers about how there's no benefit whatsoever and maybe even be harmful. And I'm reading some pundits over here complain that we're overcounting the number of COVID deaths. And then I'm reading some analysis over here saying we're undercounting the number of COVID deaths for different reasons. It's like, what's going on? You know, people talk about the death rate. I don't read any article that talks about the death rate or any graph that talks about death rate, because it's an impossible number to know. But one reason why it's impossible is because we never know the number of people who have COVID, right? We'll never get that number. We don't have enough tests. We'll never know that. But forget even about that. We won't even know the number of people who died from COVID. We still can't agree on that. So fatality rates are completely meaningless statistics. But my point is, there's still so many unknowns. So if doctors and researchers and scientists and pundits and politicians are not saying, man, I thought it was going to be this, but it looks like it's actually this. If they're not saying that every day, then I don't think they're keeping up fast enough to give you the latest. Anyway, that being said, I was wrong about Purell. So this was just whenever this thing started, like a month ago, I was in Ace, or True Value, and we were looking for Purell. It was right in the beginning of the whole thing. And they were out of Purell. They were totally out of it. And I told my wife, I said, oh, don't worry about it. Purell is just going to pump tons and tons of Purell over the next couple of days. And we just wait like 2-3 days, and the stores will be totally full of Purell. You'll be swimming in Purell. And that hasn't happened. That was a way too simplified view, because it's not just Purell. It's all the ingredients of Purell, right? They got to source all the ingredients. It's the bottles, it's the caps, it's the pumps, it's the labels, it's the ink, it's the truckers, it's the distribution centers, it's the entire supply chain. And I love this interview we did during our last special, I think a week or two ago, of the guy in Chicago who owns a plastics company, who they usually make the tops of, baby food comes in these pouches and there's like a plastic top. They usually make those, but now they're making the Purell bottle tops that you pump, and right? So but that takes time in order to do that. You can't just do that overnight. And that process is even more difficult when everything else is shut down, right? It's hard to make anything, let alone a lot of anything. So I was wrong about that. The free market's amazing, but it still takes time. Same thing with toilet paper. I thought the same thing. Like, why are companies not just making tons and tons of toilet paper? Just cash in on all this ridiculous demand for toilet paper, and just make so much toilet paper available that people buy so much they can't even walk around their house. Like, it's just stacked like a hoarder of toilet paper. Just make so much toilet paper. Why not? It's more complicated than that. So here's the story. Apparently, there are 2 toilet paper markets You have home use and commercial use. Now, because everything's shut down, the demand has been in the home toilet paper market. And the truth is, people are like, why are you hoarding toilet paper? That's so ridiculous. And it's like, well, no, it's not really, because a lot of people do need to buy more toilet paper than usual, depending on your normal daily habits. No one's using the toilet at work or school or restaurants or hotels or airports. So people are using the toilet at home more. So you need more toilet paper. Georgia Pacific, they make toilet paper based in Atlanta. They estimated that each home needs 40% more toilet paper than usual because everyone's staying home. So yeah, that alone, let alone the panic buying, but just that alone is gonna make a massive jump in demand. And especially in a market or a product where demand's relatively constant over time, they're just not built for it. They're not built for a huge spike in demand, let alone a 40% spike. So I'm hearing this, I'm reading this, and I'm thinking, well, hold on, why not just send all the toilet paper that usually goes to office buildings and airports and just send it to the grocery store so we can all buy it at the grocery store? A couple of reasons. First, it's a totally different product. It comes in huge rolls, huge bit, right? And it's shipped in pallets. So a hotel just gets pallets of toilet paper. They don't come in packs of 6 or 12. It's a totally different thing. But it also comes from a totally different supply chain. They come from different mills. So let me quote from this article I read about this process. So this is relevant for the companies that do play in both markets, like Charmin, which is owned by Johnson & Johnson, I think Johnson & Johnson. They only sell to homes, but some companies sell to both. Here's what the article says. The industry just can't flip a switch. Shifting to retail channels would require new relationships and contracts between suppliers, distributors, and stores, different formats for packing and shipping, new trucking routes, all for a bulky product with lean profit margins. Because toilet paper is high volume but low value, the industry runs on extreme efficiency, with mills built to work at full capacity around the clock, even in normal times. That works only because demand is typically so steady. So if toilet paper manufacturers spend a bunch of money now to refocus on the retail channel, they'll face the same problem in reverse when everyone heads back to work again. This is a professor at Harvard Business School. The normal distribution system is like a well-orchestrated ballet. That's the main visual that I want to get out of this whole segment here. It's a well-orchestrated ballet. If you make a delivery to a Walmart distribution center, they give you a half-hour window, and your truck has to show up then. Isn't that amazing? So if you're delivering a giant truck of toilet paper, you have a half an hour window to make that delivery. That's how well orchestrated and finely tuned and efficient the entire system is. So you can't just be like, oh, we'll just flood the market with more. It's like, it's way more. Everything's so tight right now as it is. The changes wrought by the coronavirus have thrown the whole thing out of balance, and everything has to readjust. So this is true with toilet paper, but it's true with almost everything. So bananas, right? Bananas, they're sold out of grocery stores. But what about all the bananas that used to go to restaurants and schools? Different bananas. Totally different bananas, different companies, different distribution chains, different suppliers, different everything, different trucks. Schools and restaurants, they get bananas that are individually shipped, but they're sold in giant bulk of 150, and they're much smaller. They're different things. It's literally a different breed of banana. And grocery stores, they're larger bananas. They're sold in bunches, different things. Beer. Right? Beer usually goes to restaurants and kegs. Now we got a bunch of bottles. How do you just make a billion new bottles all overnight, right? It's, especially when it's hard to adjust anything when everyone's working from home too, right? So toilet paper and all these other companies, I don't think they're gonna change their production lines much. It's too big of an investment. And no one knows how long this thing's gonna last. So let's say the toilet paper companies spend $20 million or whatever upping their production of home toilet, and then we go back to work like normal, and they're like, that was a waste of money, that didn't work. So anyway, here's why I bring all this up. This is why I like this story. Learning about how efficient everything currently is, it makes me so grateful that we have anything in our supply chains ever. It makes me so grateful that anything ever gets to grocery stores, that medicines are ever invented and made and distributed, that food is ever grown and packaged and shipped and stacked on shelves for us every single day to buy. Everything in our free market system is such a well-coordinated and orchestrated machine in normal times, and we've forgotten that. It's become too familiar and too expected, and we've lost appreciation for it. And if this whole thing ever ends, I hope we never lose that appreciation again. Quick example for COVID. England, they made 17.5 million antibody tests. I think it was between 9 different companies. They made 17.5 million antibody tests, and they don't work. They're totally useless. They gotta throw them all away. And I got frustrated when I heard that. I said, geez, like, why can't you just make an antibody test and have it work? You stupid idiot scientists. I said it as if I'm contributing anything to this effort myself. But then it got me thinking, I was like, man, I'm so grateful that we live in a time when there's even such a thing as an antibody test that we're even trying to make. It's amazing that we have any medical test. Remember the other day we talked to, where is this? We talked to the Army guy, Army colonel. And he said, we were talking about HCQ, and he's like, yeah, if you have G6PD deficiency, then you die if you take a certain derivative of HCQ. So you have to be very careful. About 5 to 10% of the population have it. I remember said, well, how do you know if you have G6PD deficiency? He's like, oh, yeah, easy. Right, well, isn't that amazing that we have tests that check for G6PD deficiency and they work? It's amazing that we have any medicines that work. The fact that this virus, COVID, is so difficult to test for, it's so difficult to test for antibodies, it's so difficult to get a treatment and a vaccine, should make us so grateful for all the tests and treatments and vaccines that we do have. Coming up next, I want to talk about an extra strategy. There's one country in Europe, they're the first country to have some sort of plan on how to get out of this. So we'll talk about that and what your expectation is for America's exit strategy. We'll do that next. True story, Mike Slater. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. So we've talked a lot about nuance and uncertainty and living in, like, different things can be true at once. Yesterday with the Navy, we talked about how, the Captain Crozier could have done the right thing and the Navy Secretary could have done the right thing. Like, both could be right and good, right? So it's like, it's a weird era, especially because we're coming out of decades of black and white, right and wrong, left and right. And now it's like much more like, a lot of things can be true at once. I found this Venn diagram yesterday, and I think this is so spot on. So you have people who are taking COVID seriously, that's me. People worried about expansion of authoritarian government policies, that's me. And people who are very concerned about impending economic devastation, that's me. I'm in the middle. I'm a mix of all. You don't have to live in just one of them, right? I feel like we have this pressure to pick one. And you got to be worried about the rise of authoritarian government, and that's it. Therefore, you think the virus is overblown and stupid. It's like, oh, no, you can think both those things. Or you have to be concerned about the economic devastation, therefore, you have to think the virus is overblown too. And it's like, oh, no, you can think both. You can think all three of these things, actually. I think that's an important place. So it's just like permission. I feel like this silly Venn diagram gives me permission to exist in all those places at once. They're not contradictory. So on the, so I want to get to Europe, the first European country to release their post-lockdown plan. I want to talk about that in a second, but on the government control and what Congress, they passed a couple weeks ago, the $2 trillion stimulus. Yesterday, the president announced another $350 billion for small businesses. I have no idea if that's going to help small businesses or not. I'm super skeptical. I feel like the unintended consequences are going to be enormous. You can't pass a $350 billion bill and not have it be enormous. Now Pelosi's talking about another $1 trillion bill, and the president comes back and says, no, it's got to be $2 trillion. I've read this, hold on. What are we talking about? The stimulus package in 2009 was $787 billion. And it's like now that we're talking in trillions, people have reset their thinking because 1 trillion, one is a smaller number than 787 billion, right? 787 billion, I think people think is a bigger number than 1 trillion because the one is smaller than 787. It's like, oh, no. A trillion's a ton of money, even if there's just one of them. And we're just like throwing it around like no big deal. Unbelievable. It's like every politician's trying to outdo the other. And my patience is running a little bit thin on these $1 trillion bills. I'll give you one of them. All right, I'll give you that one a couple weeks ago. Everyone gets a pass because things were weird. But I haven't heard anyone in DC talk about the trade-offs, talk about the unintended consequences of anything other than patting themselves on the back for how amazing and wonderful they are for swooping in and helping and saving the American people. And that just seems like a problem to me. Anyway, let's talk about what we're going to do out of this thing. So no one has any idea. No one has any clue. when we're done. No clue. No one. Everyone's guessing. Kudlow says the White House is expecting the economy could reopen, whatever that even means. Like, what a ridiculous term we're throwing around. The economy could reopen. Do you ever think you ever hear that sentence? And we say it and hear it like, oh, yeah. Been here before. 4 to 8 weeks. 4 to 8 weeks. Man. And we've been saying this for a long time, but still, to hear the president say it, and the president's always got to go on the hopeful side, too. As he said, he's got to be the nation's cheerleader. So he's not going to be someone who says what they really think, really, which is, oh, we're not opening until summertime or after or until there's a vaccine, right? So he's always going to kind of just piecemeal it. So for him to say 48 weeks, or Kudlow to say 48 weeks, I think is a lot. England said there's no chance that their shutdown is going to be lifted after the original 3 weeks. So they're still going all in. The acting prime minister, because Boris Johnson's still in intensive care, he said the worst thing the country could do is to take its foot off the pedal. So here's what's weird too. They say they're not going to end anytime soon, but then I read that the schools in England are planning to reopen after Easter, which is next week. So like, for the love of Pete, no one knows what's going on still. Even in one particular country, they have mixed messages. So Austria is the first Western country, the first European country to unveil its post-lockdown plan. By the way, South Korea and Singapore and Hong Kong, they've gone back to somewhat normal, and their cases are spiking back up again. Actually, let me find this quote. There's a lot of numbers here, but Hong Kong's slow and steady case count started going up on March 18th, so they went up and then down, and then back up again March 18th, and they took an 84 case jump on March 28th, after months of new cases barely brushing double digits. Singapore's jumped by 47, and now they've had 3 days with more than 70 new cases. We can go on, right? So the point is they're bumping back up, so it can flare back up. Of course it would. Why wouldn't it? But assuming it doesn't, which is a ridiculous assumption because of course it will, but Austria's plan is April 13th. Is that Monday? Yeah, April 13th, small shops will reopen. And then 18 days later, May 1st, larger stores will be allowed to open. I don't even know what that means over there, right? Because like Home Depot's open. So I don't know how relevant that is to us, but and they say as long as things continue to improve, which they won't, they say that restaurants, hotels, schools will open up, and public events will open up. Restaurants, hotels, and schools will open up in the middle of May, and then public events reopen in July. Still in the midst of that, social distancing everywhere, limiting the number of people in different places and restaurants. You have to wear a mask everywhere you go. So anyway, I don't know. I just want to throw that your way. Maybe we could have something like that in America. Maybe Austria's a bit ahead of us. I don't know. So we can learn at least how that works or doesn't work and learn from it, and maybe get some sort of time frame. So again, they're a little bit next week. May 1st, most things opening up. Then middle of May, and then July. Public events begin in July. I don't know. What do you think? On our Facebook page, I asked people, and it's all over the map, and it's fine. There's no right answer. There's no wrong answer because no one knows. But I mean, do you think we'll have 4th of July celebrations? There's something. Truly, like, what a weird question. Do you think we'll have public 4th of July events? One weird thing too to consider here is, or one tricky thing I should say, everything's a trade-off. So because most countries did a really hard lockdown, it's thought, and we don't know, but it's thought that some people think in America only about 5% of the country has had COVID. So let's say it's double that. Let's say it's 10% of the people have had it. That means there's a ton of people out there who are still able to get it for the very first time, and that's nowhere near enough to get herd immunity. You need like 60, 70% of people to get something to be immune, to have herd immunity. So if you just put 90 to 95% of people back into the world who have never had it, it's going to spread again just like it did. Nothing's changed. Other than we've bought some time, and now we have some more treatments, perhaps, and awareness, and maybe eventually a vaccine, but nothing's fundamentally changed, right? And that's why Ezekiel Emanuel, who's the architect of Obamacare, but more than that, he's the guy who months ago put out this academic paper on end-of-life or ration care decisions. And he also put it out a couple weeks ago through the New England Journal of Medicine with a bunch of other doctors on ethical decisions to make with limited supplies of ventilators and ICU beds and all that stuff. So he's in the very forefront of this. He says nothing's going back to normal until there's a vaccine. It's just not happening. And we talked yesterday how there's all the major hurdles to getting a vaccine if we ever do. So he says we'll never open up completely. Here's what he said. He said, one thing I've learned as a cancer doctor is that it's wrong to paint an overly rosy picture in order to maintain a patient's hope. It's wrong because it fails. It's false. Biology and disease are formidable opponents that inevitably tell us the truth. We cannot relive the oppression of this pandemic until we are realistic. We need to prepare ourselves for this to last 18 months or so, and for the toll that it will take. We need to develop a long-term solution based on those facts. And again, the 18 months is just a made-up number because people say the vaccine will be 12 to 18 months, but it could be many years. This is Neil Ferguson. So Neil Ferguson's the Imperial College guy who put out the models that weren't right. So he's been wrong a lot recently, but this is what he says. He says there's no master plan in the background being followed here. He said there's no optimal strategy that gets us through the next, frankly, 18 months. I don't know what that looks like or if that's even feasible. We don't have a clear exit strategy at the moment. Again, he's talking about in England. So I'll end here with this quote from the Financial Times. Right? So the Financial Times, they quoted Neil Ferguson there, and they ended with this. They said, that's right. If we're to trust what one of the government's top scientific advisors is telling us, there is at this point no master plan in place. Reassuring stuff, we're sure you'll agree. Just over a week ago, we tried to flatten the coronavirus confusion curve. Since then, frankly, the confusion feels like it's intensified. We perhaps just need to accept, uncomfortable as it may be, that we're living in a world in which the experts and leaders to whom we normally turn for guidance just don't have all the answers that we're looking for. Nobody fully understands this virus yet. Nobody knows where the exit door is. So, I don't know. I have no positive way to end that segment. I usually like to end on some sort of positive note. I got nothing other than to get your mind right for months. In the best case scenario, it's less than that, and you were prepared the whole time. Let's do something positive next. Coming up next, we're going to talk to someone from Samaritan's Purse. This is the group that set up that field hospital in Central Park, but they're around the world, and they've been in Italy for months now. So we'll talk to someone in Italy about what they've seen and the amazing work that Samaritan's Purse is doing. That's definitely good news. And then if we have some time at the end, we'll talk about some advice that I've been given on how to stay sane in light of hearing, not the best news all the time. So we got all that coming up. True story, Mike Slater. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, let's get some good news here, please. Let's talk about the people who are helping and saving lives, and on top of that, saving souls. Beautiful news from some beautiful people in Italy. I want to go to Kelly Seitz, who is a nurse at Samaritan's Purse. This is also the same group, Samaritan's Purse, who set up that field hospital in Central Park in New York City. But Kelly's in Italy. Kelly, how are you?
Hi, we're good, thank you.
So good to talk to you. Thank you for serving and for loving people. It's beautiful. Let's, real quick, what is Samaritan's Purse? Give us the quick rundown on big picture. What is Samaritan's Purse? What's their mission?
So Samaritan's Purse landed in northern Italy on March 17th on our DC-8, and we brought a 68-bed emergency field hospital converted to a respiratory care unit. So we're partnered with the very large hospital. We're in their parking lot. It's a 500-bed hospital. They have 500 COVID patients right now. So wow. We came with our 68 beds to help supplement them and help them with the overflow patients. We have an intensive care unit with ventilators.
I'm sorry, I was just going to say, their hospital's totally full. You said it's a 500-bed hospital and they have 500 COVID patients.
Yeah, 500 COVID patients, and 100 of those 500 are medical staff from their hospital who've gotten sick with the disease.
No. Wow. Okay. What are you doing there, Kelly? How did you get connected with Samaritan's Purse?
Well, I've been working with Samaritan's Purse since 2009. So we're a disaster assistance response team. So I've deployed all over the world. This is my 19th deployment, ironically with COVID-19. I've deployed 4 times with Ebola and cholera and diphtheria. So this is what we do, where we come to disasters to help support and help the community.
Why do you do it?
I do it because Jesus tells us to love our neighbors as ourselves. And you can't look away when you have the power to change and help. So I leave my husband and my 2 kids and deploy for a month or 5 weeks at a time to use my nursing skills for God's glory.
Yeah, so you brought me to tears, Kelly. What is your husband and how old are your kids and what do you tell them about it and what do they say about you leaving?
Yeah, so my kids, that I have twins and they're now 21, but we started this work when they were 11. So it's a great opportunity to bring the world back to them, to give them a broader perspective of what's going on in the world outside of themselves. It's really important to our family to know that God calls us to scary, uncomfortable places sometimes to be able to help. And if we can help, we really should go and sacrifice. It's not a sacrifice for our family, it's a blessing and it's a family ministry.
Man. Kelly, I've been sitting at home doing nothing. And you're traveling around the world doing amazing work. Man, I'm grateful. Tell us about, so first of all, how are you guys able, let's do the physical first. We'll do physical, emotional, and then spiritual. How are you guys able to have the expertise and the equipment and the professional know-how to provide top-notch, first-class medical care in the first place?
Well, Samaritan's Purse does an amazing job training us. So there's that. We've had great extensive training, especially with the Ebola outbreak. It really set us up for success for things like this because our Ebola training was really up here and as high as you can get with a 90% fatality. So to be able to come here and transfer those skills, it really was an easy transition. But, we're all trained in the U.S. We're here with doctors and nurses from all over the world, mostly from the United States, but also Canada and the UK, Australia, and other places. And we're just so blessed to be here to help.
How many doctors and nurses are in those tents behind you through Samaritan's Purse?
We have a whole team of about 70 disaster response specialists, about 32 or so are doctors and nurses. So it takes the whole rest of the team to be able to support what's going on here.
Wow. Okay, and where else are you guys? Do you know, or are you just so focused on Italy? Right, because I know you're in Central Park, but where else are you for COVID?
Yeah, we're in Central Park with the exact same setup there, the exact same number of beds, and the identical situation. We set up here first, and then that set them up for success to set up in New York City.
Very good. Okay, let's talk about the emotional health, because there's an amazing picture that was posted on the Twitter, your guys' Twitter, and it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, there's 6 doctors and nurses, all with a phone on speakerphone, and it says, here the team called an ICU patient's spouse to let her know we're doing everything we can to fight the coronavirus. Tell us about the steps you guys take to help patients and families' emotional health through this too.
Yeah, this is an important aspect of what we're doing here because we cannot allow visitors. The hospital next to us doesn't allow visitors because of the contagious aspect of this disease. So we are literally, all of our patients have. We're there to hold their hands. We've had to share with our patients. We have a husband and wife. The husband's at the other hospital, and unfortunately he passed away. And we had to share that news with his wife, who's still in our tent being cared for by our staff. It's very challenging to not to share with the family that we're loving their family members and caring for them, and they're getting the best care. And a lot of them have cell phones, so they're able to speak to their family members. But the ones who are in the intensive care get a call every single day from our staff to give them updates on how they're doing.
How do you personally slow down and treat a patient with the dignity and respect that they need in the moment when there's so much going on and so much to do?
Yeah, something that I'm really passionate about because there are so many statistics out there with COVID numbers, over 1 million COVID cases. It's easy to forget that there's a human being behind every single one of those numbers. And so for me, I always focus on the person right in front of me. And no matter how busy we are, to focus in that they're so afraid, they've lost so much, and they don't know what's going to happen. They don't know when they'll be able to leave. So I really need to slow down and focus on the patient in front of me and hold their hands, which I was just doing right before I talked to you, actually, holding one of our ladies who's been here for over a month. It's important to not think of the statistics, but it's a human being.
What are, and obviously it's a range, but what are your patients' biggest fears in the moment?
Well, the ladies that I was just taking care of earlier were afraid that they were never going to leave. They've been in the hospital a long time. They're elderly, and so their strength is completely zapped. A couple of them just came off the ventilators a few weeks ago. So they're afraid they're never going to get strong again. But we've seen a lot of increase in their strength as they've been here. We walk them and ambulate them daily, and we just encourage them to keep their minds strong, and we pray for them every single day.
I want to get to that praying part, but last question on this: what? I forget how I was going to word it. I forget. Let's do that instead. Let's do the spiritual health, because this is, I think, the most. I don't know. It's important to put someone on a ventilator who needs it, right? But the spiritual health, I think, is incredibly important. How do you guys provide that shamelessly?
Yeah, we have crosses on all of our tents. In our logo, Samaritan's Purse. Most people are familiar with the Good Samaritan, so we explain why we've come. We get that question all the time. Why have you come? They know America is blowing up with cases. So why would you come here when your country's, having equal amount of cases? We start our day as a team with devotions in God's word every day. And we start with prayer. And then we go out, we kind of deploy out to our patients. And then we continue all day long praying and playing music for them. And then we have chaplains who give them Bibles when they walk out the doors.
What's a scripture that's given you peace and hope throughout this time?
Since day one, 10 years ago, I've always written Philippians 4:13, those words on my tennis shoe with a Sharpie marker. And it helps me to always remember when I'm really exhausted. I can look down in the middle of fear, or who knows what this day is going to be like, or death, or sadness, or happiness. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me.
Amen. I remember the question I was going to ask. One aspect to this that I don't think one can fully understand unless you're in the midst of it, as you are, is the isolation of it and the emotional pain that isolation causes for the patient and for family. Can you speak to that for a little bit? Because I couldn't imagine, it's bad enough if my wife or I were in the hospital, but if I couldn't go see her and she couldn't see our kids, like that's just another punch in the gut.
Yeah, that adds to the stress for our patients because they're going through so much. They were near death, many of them on ventilators, and so afraid they would never see their family again. Yet they do fully understand that they can't be with their family right now, so they accept that, but it's very hard for them. So it's important that we bridge that for them and help them to be in touch with their family members as often as they can so that they feel connected.
Yeah, that's so important and so difficult. What's your message to everyone in America about the disease itself? As some people still aren't really taking it seriously or whatever. What's your message there, based medically on what you've seen on the ground?
Yeah, I think America's really understanding now more and more as this thing gets out of control there that this is real, and that the things that the government is asking them to do, the health departments the CDC are asking them to do, it's very important. This is what's changing the tide here in Italy. Everything's shut down. There's no touching. We have social distancing. We all wear masks. It's important to follow that to keep other people safe. It's not just about ourselves, but it's about protecting the vulnerable population. When you see patients on vents like we do, you don't want that to happen to people. So you need to take it seriously.
What ages are you seeing in your tents?
We've seen a lot of the elderly population, but we have had some 40s and 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and even some 90-year-olds.
What do you and the doctors and everyone at Samaritan's Purse, how do you guys reconcile? And this is a difficult theological question, but I'm throwing it your way. because you got on a plane and flew to Italy, so you believe this deeply, as do I. But how do you guys reconcile God's role through the midst of this? How do you think through that?
Yeah, we always talk about the theology of suffering and understanding God's reason. God is sovereign, and we can't always put the pieces together. It kind of reminds me of a jigsaw puzzle. When you open the box, all the different pieces, you cannot even tell what it's going to make until you put all the pieces together, and then it makes a beautiful masterpiece. So sometimes we're just part of the jigsaw puzzle, and we don't always make sense of it. We know God is sovereign. We know God is good. We know his heart breaks for what he's seeing. And we know that he loves people deeply and desperately. And he wants them to turn to him during this time.
Yeah, and you love people deeply as well, Kelly. Gosh, so impressive, so inspiring. I love it. I'm so grateful for you. Where do you live, Kelly? Where's home?
I live in Michigan.
Okay, I can't wait for you to come back. When are you coming back?
I'm actually coming back next week. I'll have been here a month, and it's time for me to go back home to my family.
It is. It absolutely is. Can you, when you get back home and you kind of unwind and you get some family time and everything, can you call back in and we can debrief on your experience entirely?
Yes, we'll see. You can keep in touch with Alyssa, and she'll see what we can do.
Yeah. So what's your big picture takeaway of your experience so far compared to all the other deployments that you've had in your life?
Well, each deployment is a challenge for whatever reason: earthquakes, tsunamis, cyclones, outbreaks. This one's no different, but the people of Italy are so beautiful and so lovely to be here to help them. It's a privilege to be here, as hard as it is and the challenge that it is, to be able to support the hospital next door. And let me tell you, when we have patients who've been on ventilators and they're better and they walk out our doors and our whole staff pours out of the tents and claps for them and they cheer, that makes it all worth it. I would do it again 100 times.
Kelly Seitz, Samaritan's Purse. Beautiful, Kelly. Keep up the wonderful work, and we'll talk soon. Please give my best to everyone that you're working with today.
I will. Thank you for your prayers.
My honor. Kelly, you're wonderful. Thank you. All right, well, there you go. So that the last segment I did was a little negative. It was a little on the negative side. And then we come back with Kelly, and it's overwhelmingly beautiful. Good stuff. True story. Mike Slater. Spread the word. Slater Crusaders. That was like, how awesome was that? It was Kelly and all the doctors and nurses flying around the world multiple times to help people. Like, that was perfect. That was beautiful. I loved everything about that. I want to try to match that tone best I can. So I've been compiling insight from smart people who, from a mental health perspective, whether it's NASA astronauts, or people who deploy on submarines. By the way, people on submarines who have been on a submarine for the last 6 months still don't know that this, or 60 days, still don't know that this is a thing. When they come back to land, they'll be like, what is happening here? And I've also from people who have worked at home for a long time, and just where we are from a mental health standpoint, a quarantine standpoint, and not going loco. So just a couple things real quick, just throw a bunch of points at you. So, talked about this one a couple weeks ago. If you're working from home, first thing, get up, take a shower, get dressed. All right, so we've been doing this now for a couple weeks now, so I know you've been there. It is not good for your mental health to wear pajamas all day long. It's a bummer. I wish that were cool. I wish you could do it. And as new and as fun as it may seem, maybe the first day or two, for whatever reason, I don't know the science behind it, and I wish it weren't the case, but it's not good to wear pajamas all the time. I mean, I'm wearing pajama pants right now, but that doesn't mean you should. Another thing I've heard, Mark Manson puts it, he says, routine is king. Now, maybe you're not a routine person. I happen to be, but if you say you're not a routine person, get over it, put that aside for a couple weeks or a couple months, however long this is going, and live by a routine the best you can. At least something, some things throughout the day that you do every day at around or at exactly the same time. And the reason it's important is because everything's out of control in the world right now. and everything's upside down. And you need, and I need as much control over what you can control as possible. And some routine, it doesn't matter what it is, like every day at 11, you do 10 push-ups. I don't care what it is, but some routine gives you some sense of control that is really good for your sanity. That's first thing. Second thing, exercise best you can. It's funny, people are either going to come out of this thing fatter and less healthy or fitter and more healthy. So you're not commuting anymore. So as I just mentioned, do some push-ups, right? You're not doing your half-hour drive or whatever it is, so you could get a minute to do a couple push-ups. One of my friends, he didn't work out for a long time, and then just recently he got back into it, and he said his mental clarity, his focus is so much better. He didn't even realize it before, but he was walking around with this haze over his eyes. He had trouble paying attention, trouble understanding people. Truly, like he says this, his brain was slower to react and respond. And it's true for everyone to different degrees. It was amazing for him how quick his transformation was once he started exercising. And it doesn't take much. 15 minutes of consistent work every day is better than nothing. And it's also better than one big thing a week. So just 15 minutes a day, that's it, just do it. Another point. There's a big difference between being scared and full of fear. There's a distinction between scared and fear, two different things. Ryan Holiday wrote a great piece on this. And he said, even the Stoics, who were masters of their emotions, admitted that we're going to have natural reactions to things that are out of our control, right? So if someone dumps a bucket of cold water on your head, you're going to feel cold. You can't, work your way out. That's going to happen. If someone jumps out from behind a corner to scare you, you're going to feel scared. No amount of training or wisdom is going to prevent us from having these reactions. That's just standard. You can't get away from that. But the Stoics had a term for that. It was a different thing, that type of initial emotional reaction. What really matters is what you do next. It's how you react to it that matters. And that's why William Faulkner, he said, be scared. You can't help that. But don't be afraid. A scare it's a temporary rush of a feeling. But being afraid is an ongoing process. Fear is a state of being. It's okay to be scared in a moment, but don't live in fear, right? Scare is actually good. All emotions are good to an extent for a reason, right? So if you're scared, it tells you that this is a big deal. Something's happening. I need to be prepared. Speaking of prepared, on our special on Friday, we're going to talk to a Navy SEAL about being prepared, right? So if you're scared, you're like, what do I do? Well, listen, on Friday, we're going to talk to a Navy SEAL. He's going to tell you what to do. Right? But I guarantee you he's going to say, don't live in fear, because that's just going to make things worse. Prepare for the worst case, but don't live there. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this. There was a plague when he was emperor. And he said, he wrote this in his diary. He said, don't try to picture everything bad that could possibly happen. Stick with the situation at hand. Isn't that amazing? He wrote that 2,000 years ago. Don't try to picture everything bad that could possibly happen. Stick with the situation at hand. I could quote Jesus here as well, but if you quote the Bible, then everyone's like, well, you Jesus, Bible thumper, blah, blah, blah. But if you quote Marcus Aurelius, then everyone's like, oh, they're so smart. But Jesus said the same thing. He said, don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow's got enough worries. Focus on today. Final point. James Clear has a book, and one of the chapters, he talks about the difference between motion and action. We confuse the two. Just like we confuse scare with fear, we confuse motion and action. So the difference is, he said, I could outline 20 ideas for articles that I want to write. That's motion. But if I actually write and publish an article, that's action. If I search for a diet plan and read books about diet, that's motion. But if I actually eat a healthy meal, that's action. If I go to the gym and I ask about getting a personal trainer, that's motion. If I actually get underneath the bar and start squatting, that's action. And there's been so much uncertainty and chaos and fear, right? We've had a ton of motion, right? I don't know if you feel that way too. It's just like motion overload. Not a lot of action. You know who's a person of action? Kelly, who flew to Italy to help people in need because she can. That's action. Motion's like, freaking out. She's not living in motion. She's not living in fear. A lot of smart, capable people get stuck in motion all the time. And we trick ourselves into thinking it's action. There's no new ideas. John Wooden, one of the greatest coaches of all time, he said, never mistake activity for achievement. Kind of the same thing here. We're running around and we think we're doing stuff, and we're doing stuff for good, but we're not. It's just motion. Last point. In conclusion, I should say. Chris Rufo, he wrote, we talked to Chris yesterday from City Journal. He's awesome. He wrote a great piece in American Greatness. He called it Growth Without Virtue. And he said, we've burned away the most useful pages of Tocqueville's Democracy in America and Smith's Wealth of Nations and Franklin's Way to Wealth, which argue that capitalism only functions in the context of moral restraint. In fact, the entire same thing our founding fathers said, you can have this republic, but only if you're a morally righteous people. Same thing with capitalism. You can have capitalism, but only in the context of moral restraint. He says the entire vocabulary of the early liberal thinkers has become a dead language. Try persuading someone under 40 the value of industry, frugality, and thrift. So even if we want action, we got to make sure we get action in the right direction. Growth with virtue. So in conclusion, we need routines so you can control what you can for the sake of your sanity. Exercise a bit, take care of your health, your immune system. 3, there's a difference between being scared and being full of fear. Scared's okay, use the scare for motivation. And motivation not for motion, running around, but for action. And let's let this motivate us and lead us on a path of lasting change. And lasting change to what used to define America. Industry, frugality, and thrift. Hopefully this can usher in a new era, and in many ways an era that was the great American virtues. True story. Mike Slater. Be back tomorrow. Have a great rest of your day.